Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
What would happen if your team really loved each other? It's a conversation that most leaders are a little uncomfortable having, but it's one we're going to have here today. Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, our definition of pursuing genuine community, that's what we've been talking about these last few days, includes this idea of loving people and allowing them to love us. And we've got some specific ways today that I think we can do that, we can unpack. And so this will be a good conversation.
It will be.
Welcome today, buddy. I hope you're doing good. To see you too. I'm fired up that we're getting to do this together. So I heard an old quote years ago. I think I saw it in a book, a chapter title of a book. It made this little statement. It said, weddings are optional, funerals are mandatory. Weddings are optional, funerals are mandatory. Basically what he was saying was, or what this book was saying was that anybody can show up when things are good, but if you really want to know if somebody's with you, they show up when things are not so good. Mm-hmm. And in the definition the other day, when we talked about love and are loved, you gave us this last layer of they celebrate and they mourn together. And I think that's the spirit of what we're talking about. So let's dive in a little bit today. What are some of the ways that teams can show love? I mean, I think love has to be demonstrated, and celebrating each other is one of the great ways to do that, right?
Sure. I think any number of ideas. Random acts of kindness, words of gratitude and appreciation, notes of encouragement. I think all of these can often be overlooked.
Launching a book on a man's birthday.
Launching a book on my birthday. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's crazy. And you know, I have few regrets, but one is that I didn't do a better job over the last 45 years at some of those simple expressions of gratitude, simple expressions of appreciation. And I've had people, I can think of a couple of examples. One guy, I was actually teaching this content and knowing that I've done it sporadically, but I had a guy who I was in community with 30 years ago. And I was encouraging the group to write notes of thanks, appreciation, and encouragement. And he said, you wrote one of those for me before. And I said, well, I think I did. And I was trying to think it was probably 5 years before that. And I acted like I was going to move on. He said, no, you don't understand. I said, well, what are you saying? He said, well, you wrote one of those for me. And I said, well, I'm glad you remember that. He said, no, I carry it with me. It's in my bag right now. I've had more than one of those experiences because people are starved for genuine expression of appreciation and gratitude and thanks and encouragement. So I don't want to miss, again, I should have done more. I'm trying to do more. I've got a note today, a note to me, to write a note to somebody that I need to thank.
Yeah.
That's not my first instinct, but it's amazing the ripple effect and the lasting impact that some of those small, seemingly irrelevant expressions. And I love that guy, and he loves me. But the fact I wrote him a note that he carried in his bag at least for 5 years, I was almost embarrassed. I mean, it was like 3 sentences, and it meant so much to him. I'm thinking, how many of those opportunities have I missed?
Yeah, and I think for the team that's listening here, there is a possible opportunity to create a culture of celebration and appreciation if you don't have that. You can
get started.
And because I'll give you an example, or tell you a quick story. I was a part of an organization years ago where this was really this was a part of what was going on. The leader, it was a person who decided that he was going to write notes to people, and the people around him were doing that, and all of a sudden the whole organization began to do that. And I bet I have, I'll say 500 notes, and I've got a couple of boxes full of notes. I was in this organization a long time. I got a couple of boxes of notes that I have kept for years, and since I left that organization, I've probably got 50 in 10 years versus 500. I mean, and you look back and you go, okay, this is a cultural thing. This is not just a leader or a group of leaders. This has become pervasive.
My guess is community was strong.
Red hot and important in that organization. It really was. And so this idea, and by the way, I did keep all those notes thinking there might be a day where I'm kind of discouraged and I might need to go pick. I don't usually go back and get them, but how many times you meet somebody and they go, I got a note of encouragement and threw it away. It happens, but most people, they save those for you. I mean, your guy of 5 years, it happens all the time.
It was still in his bag.
It's just a piece of paper, and you're going, this, and it was said years ago, but there's something there
into him.
In that.
Yeah.
It's exactly
so just
right.
don't miss that. Those simple
Huge.
expressions can be profound.
Yeah. So for the team listening, I would just encourage you to make this a priority again, that you're going to celebrate each other and be grateful to each other and thank each other and appreciate each other.
Let's do this. Let's make it even more pointed. In the next week, write a note to somebody on your team saying thank you.
Yeah, that's
or
good.
I appreciate you.
That's good.
Or great job on XYZ, if it was a great job, right? They still have to be
It's gotta
genuine.
be genuine.
They have
That's
to be
right.
authentic. And 2 sentences, 3 sentences. And I'm not talking about a text. I'm not talking about an email. I'm talking about on a card with a pen, and they'll keep it.
Yeah.
And so that would be just one
If
tactic.
this is hard for you, one of the things I've done is I've got a stack of cards that I keep on a place where I am every single morning, and I try to write one a day. I mean, I'm just trying to train myself to get better at this, because it's easy to just move on to the next thing.
I know.
And so
I
it's
should have
just-
done better.
it-
But
it's-
that's one example.
Yeah.
We got,
All right.
couple more.
Well, yeah, you got another
no,
example.
go
That's
ahead.
good. No, go ahead.
Well, we're talking about random acts of kindness,
Mm-hmm.
expressing thanks and gratitude and appreciation, but just literally celebrating with people. And we need to let them give us those cues. You mentioned in a previous episode about going to a T-ball game. I was in community with a guy for years, and he started telling the group that his son was going to play football. Now, I don't know if you've heard me tell this story. He wasn't talking about playing high school, collegiate, or professional. His son was going to play middle school football, but he started talking about it several years in advance. So
Kids
we
in
all
third or fourth grade.
We
Then you
all
got-
kind of knew this was important. So it came time for that first game on a Thursday afternoon. That's when they did those in our community. I'm leaving the office early. Somebody said, "Where are you going?" I said, "To a middle school football game." And they said, "Do you have a son that's in middle school?" I said, "No, but I have a dear friend
A guy on my team.
whose son is going to play this afternoon, and I'm going to be there to celebrate. Whether the kid plays, whether he's a star, whether he sits on the bench, I'm going to be there to hug the kid's neck and my friend's neck, because I want to celebrate something he has been looking forward to for so long."
Yeah, that's good.
So let them decide what needs to be celebrated.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so the other side of that is we said celebrate, but we also want to talk about grieving together here for a second. And grieving sounds like a big, heavy word. It is a heavy word. Sometimes there's death, and there's, when
It happens.
It does happen, and everybody's going to die at some point. There's grief that happens on a team, but sometimes it doesn't have to be. Somebody can just be going through something really hard, not death kind of hard, but something really hard, and we can show up for each other in those moments when we're wondering, are we going through this alone? And we don't have to if we think about this correctly as a team. I think there's huge power in this. I would even say, I'll go back to our where we started. Weddings are, the celebration. It shouldn't be optional. It's probably mandatory too if you want to get. But the grieving part really is mandatory, that we are there for each other. If we're going to be the kind of team we're talking about, you got to show up for each other.
Yeah, you got to show up. You mentioned earlier us showing up at a funeral. I've done that more than once. The most extreme case was a guy whose dad died, and just based on circumstances, there were several of us, and it was complicated. We could not be there for the funeral. And so we chartered a plane, and we went the night before to the funeral home. We went in, we hugged his neck, told him we loved him, got back on the plane and flew out. And I've had people ask me point blank, "Did you have to do that?" I said, "Well, we chose to do that because we were in community together."
Yeah. What kind of team do you
We
want to have?
needed him to know how much
We're
we
with
loved
you.
him.
Yeah.
And he was not alone, even though we couldn't be there on the actual day of the funeral.
Yeah, well, it just, if you remember just a few weeks ago, you won't have forgotten, you and I drove in the middle of nowhere for 3 or 4 hours to stand in a line for a guy's dad who had passed away. And I say stand in a line, this was
It was
small,
the longest line I've ever
longest
been
line
in
I've ever
at a
seen. I mean, it's
funeral.
2 or 3 hour line to hug a guy's neck and
drive back.
then drove back through the middle. I mean, literally, we didn't see a store there was nowhere to get food.
That's what you do.
It's what you do when you're in community, is because we love that guy. And so, yeah, I think when you think about your team today, you're listening. My question to you would be, are you celebrating together? I like your question. Pick one person on your team, write them a note this week. But I would also say to you, who's hurting on your team right now? And they may not be somebody died, got to stand in a funeral home line or charter a plane. I mean, somebody on your team's going through something hard right now. And if you see that, and if you're there for them, maybe you make them a meal. Maybe you go and sit with them and just listen to them. You'll know what to do. See a need, meet a need this week on your team. You do that week after week after week. Again, I like what you said the other day. It's cumulative over time. Community begins to grow. And when it does, your team is going to be on its way to an elite place. It really can be. But again, let's go back to what I talked about earlier. I love it that you're going to get to elite, but here's what I love even more, that you're going to love being together. That's the part. It's got to be genuine if we're going to really do this the right way. All right, hope you guys will join us tomorrow. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.